Welcome everybody to Elizabethtown City Council work session for October 14th, 2019. I would like to ask Tony Bishop to lead us in the invitation.
May we pray. Our Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all your blessings. We thank you for watching over our community and all those who live and about here. We ask for blessings upon all our city workers and our employees, those who provide quality service to our citizens. We ask special blessings upon all of our special responders. We ask that you be with our community as a whole. Those that are sick, shut in, those who lost loved ones, send your comforting angel around them. Be with us this day as we go about the business of the city. We ask that you lead us, guide us, and direct us the way that you have us to go. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. In Wood Station. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to start off by reading a proclamation. Whereas the purpose of National Disability Employment Awareness Month, NDEAM, is to educate the public about disability employment issues and celebrate the many contributions of America's workers with disabilities. NDEAM is a nationwide campaign celebrating the skills and talents that workers with disabilities bring to our workplaces. The 2019 NDEAM theme is "The Right Talent, Right Now," is in unity with the City of Elizabethtown's efforts to promote inclusivity in Elizabethtown. The City of Elizabethtown recognizes that every American who is willing and able to work should have the opportunity to provide for themselves and their families. This includes the 30 million American adults with disabilities. The City of Elizabethtown employers and workplaces welcome the talents of all people, including people with disabilities, as an essential component for an inclusive community and strong local economy. In this spirit, the City of Elizabethtown acknowledges the efforts of Professional Contract Services Incorporated, Ireland Army Community Hospital, whose mission is to create employment opportunities for people with every type of disability and raise awareness about disability employment issues. The President and Congress have officially declared October 2019 as National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Now, therefore, I, Jeffrey H. Gregory, Mayor of Elizabethtown, Kentucky, do hereby proclaim October 2019 as National Disability Employment Awareness Month in Elizabethtown and encourage its observance. Thank you both. And so we're going to start our first order of business with my friend Seth Breitner, who's going to come up and talk about Pritchard Community Center fees.
Good afternoon, everybody. In your packet that you all should have, I've basically got 3 sections of information. The first section is just an outline, and within that outline, there's kind of an overview of what our current fees are, when they were last, put into place or raised, which was 2005. And it kind of goes through the overview, our proposal moving forward on our price structure, and then just a couple of points after that in summary. The next section that you all have is a study that we did as far as across the state, different agencies, what they charge as a comparison for where we got our rates, the proposed rates that we're going to present to you all. And the very last section that you all have is a list of events, and that is a list from 2018. That list is very similar every year. So since that was a complete calendar year, that's why we threw that one in there. So what I want to do is just basically start with the overview. The last rate change at Pritchard was in 2005. And you can see there what the 2005 fee was to what it is now. You can also see at the very top of the page right there what our room rates, what those fees are currently at. Those rates on the very far right side, you'll see what we charge for the extras like tables and chairs and different things along those lines. In 2018, we had 840 total rentals. A lot of those are reoccurring every year, about 264 of those are reoccurring. And we also have a nonprofit discounted rate of 50%, which on that sheet of all the events is listed in blue. So I tried to break that out as easily as I could so you could quickly identify those. What we are looking at doing, if you'll flip over to the second page on the first section, these are our proposed rates. And what we're looking at doing is doing a weekday versus a weekend rate. We found that a lot of agencies across the state use this, and it also aligns with how the building is used with different functions, whether the building is fully rented out for expos and different things versus meeting space and all of that. You'll see what our proposed rates are right there, which we're proposing. I'll just run through it really quick. That on the multi-purpose rooms, which is our gymnasiums, $35 an hour on the weekday, $50 an hour on the weekend, or a daily rate of $325 on the weekday, which is basically 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., or a $480 rate, which is Friday through Sunday, and that's 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Anything after 10 p.m. would be additional fees or extra, because that's typically the time the building closes, but we do stay open later for certain events. So that would be an hourly rate based on what would be used after that time period. The meeting rooms is after that, and you'll see that we're proposing $25 per hour during the weekday, $35 on the weekend, daily rate of $175, or a weekend rate of $325, or $225, I'm sorry. Some of the extra amenities, I just threw this in to kind of give you, so you could see what we're charging now versus what we propose to go to. That rate right now, if you take a coffee bar, $3, which includes the coffee, the straws, the cups, the creamer, everything else. I mean, we're not even paying for what we have into our cost right now. So that I put that in there to say we've looked at everything. We're looking at an increase in our tables and chairs. Right now, they're 50 cents a chair or $1 a table, and we're proposing $2 a chair or $4 a table. There's a current, and this is I'll get your all's take on this, but currently there's a city versus a non-city fee. The percentage on that doesn't even make sense to me necessarily, because it's not like a 15% or 20% or anything. It's like a 17 point whatever. I'm not sure how that was gotten to during that time frame, but we're proposing just a flat fee, and that also helps us with tracking. I mean, it's just an easier, more simple way to kind of put that in there. And then the other thing is, currently right now, like I said, we do a lot of nonprofits. There was, I've got this figure in there, but there was 100 rentals in 2018 that were nonprofit, and we're basically giving away the rooms for that at 50% rate. We still propose that there be a discount, but it not be the 50%. What I'm proposing is 15%. And the last point I wanted to make on this was, we book a year in advance, and we have contracts that are already in place. So it's important for us to honor the contracts that we currently have. But as soon as this goes into effect, this would be directly related to any new contracts that we put into place. So that would be how we would approach any increase that we would do. By raising the cost and aligning it with more what other agencies and things across the state are charging, it will drastically help us to offset the expenses that we incur at the community center. Right now, based off of the fees that we charge, we're collecting about 20% of our expenses, collecting about 20% of that back in our revenue. So we're not covering anywhere close to the cost that it takes to operate that facility right now. And the other thing is, I would like to, every 3 years or so, look at the rate structure and see, are we at where it needs to be, or do we need to look at a different rate and not wait 15 years down the road? Because while this might seem a little more drastic of an increase, which personally I believe that it's not, because it does align. You can ask anybody that books at the community center and they'll tell you the rate is dirt cheap. So I think we are aligning ourselves with where it needs to be, but by evaluating every 3 years, we won't have this drastic jump. So that is basically what we're proposing. That kind of gives you a background of information and everything, of how that is, how we've come up with that charge. So a couple of questions I had, but before I get into that, is there any questions that you all have for me?
You say contracts, how far out are you talking these contracts you currently have?
Currently, we go a year out. So what we're proposing is, like, say we signed a contract today and it was for 2020 of this date next year, we honor that. But if there's any new contracts that we fill within the meantime, that we go to this new structure. So anything that's already agreed upon in writing, we honor what's already agreed upon.
So in 2021, everybody will be on.
Correct, yeah.
Seth, the only thing that I see that when you compare the way y'all do your rates compared to other places, I think you're the only one that actually counts chairs and tables. Have you thought about just including just obtuse? I see a lot of them say capacity 456 with tables and chairs.
Right.
Have you ever thought about just coming up with a rate that says, here's what it costs, and this is how many tables and chairs will fit in there?
We have talked about that, and the reason that we did not put that in there is because our style of events fluctuates so dramatically. We could have an event that comes in and has no tables and chairs because they want the basketball courts, versus somebody that might come in and say, we want 700 chairs only with no tables, or somebody even like a chamber luncheon that needs, both. So to come up with that, and I think the way that we looked at that capacity was that was the capacity of their rooms.
Yes.
So it wasn't necessarily, this is the max amount of tables and chairs that we'll put in for that cost. This is just what we can accommodate up to. So at the end of the day, yes, we did look at that, but we decided not to put it in that way because of we're all over the board when it comes to the setups that we do.
Do the other facilities, do they set up the tables and chairs and break them down when the events are over? Do they leave it up to the clients to do that?
Some do, I should say a lot do, some don't. But I like having that control because it allows us to keep the control over our inventory, to make sure that things are satisfactory for what the event needs. And at the end of the day, I think, it's what we do and what we're known for, as far as the customer service that we do down there. So I'd like to keep that intact. So a couple of questions I'll leave you all with, unless you've got some more for me, were one, the nonprofit rate that we're proposing from the 50% to the 15%, if you all were good with that. And then the other, are you all good with the weekday versus weekend pricing and looking at that? So those would be my two main things pulling away from this.
I'm good.
I think if you look at that 2018 from January to December, it'll shock you how much that place is rented and how busy you all are down there.
Yeah, even if you drove by there today, that parking lot was cram-packed. We had the whole building rented out today.
So another question. There's a convention that's going on Monday through Friday. They need some chairs. Keep it the same way every day, all 5 days. Not paying for those chairs each day.
Those are a one-time. Yeah, those are the setup tear down cost. Yeah, so that's how that's evaluated.
I got you, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, we base it off of the total number at the end of the day, I guess, would be the best way to say that.
Why? Yeah.
All right, well.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right,
You're welcome.
keep in mind too, Seth, that with the increase in prices, there's gonna be quite a bit of renovation out there as well.
Yeah,
So people are
absolutely.
gonna get a brand new experience along with these increased prices.
Exactly. I mean, we're looking at putting, close to $2 million into the building. So the building's going to be phenomenal. We're already extremely cheap. So this is it's time.
Thank you, Seth. You're welcome. Mike, thank you, next, CSX Railroad Crossing.
I'm just looking at the
Not gonna like this, that was-
I was gonna pay for that clock.
All right, go ahead.
I just want to notify everyone that there'll be a couple of railroad crossings owned by CSX that will be closed for some routine maintenance and replacing the railroad ties and resurfacing those paved approaches. They're scheduled for November 11th. Those two crossings are Nicholas Street Railroad Crossing. We've got two Nicholas Street Railroad crossings, but this particular one that's closing is the one near US 31W bypass across from Southern States. That process takes about 3 days. Will need to be closed, and then they'll move on to East Crusher Street, and that'll be closed. That was a little more inconvenient of a detour to Nicholas Street, since they have another intersection of College Street there to reroute traffic. But with East Crutcher, they'll have to use Dixie to get around that obstacle. So as of now, they have told me that it's going to be November 11th. It's about a month away. So if things change, we will notify the public of those. But just wanted to get that word out there now.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Rita Davis is going to talk to us about Buffalo Lake, Stantec contract.
Good evening. Okay, so just to remind you guys, this dam reconnaissance project or recommissioning project is to rehabilitate Buffalo Valley and Trooper dams. They were built in the late 60s and early 70s, and the aging infrastructure is in need of rehabilitation. They're an integral part of our stormwater system as they retain floodwaters from the high-density downtown area. So what we're looking to do is remove accumulated sediments from the pool, replace drawdown gate structures, reconstruct our outlet works, reconstruct portions of the earthen embankment if necessary, and construct and rehabilitate dam access. So the first in line is Buffalo, just because it aligns better with other recreational goals that we have for that lake. So to date, we've had Hydromax USA. They came out and did some tow drain inspections at all three dams. So they took video of what they were able to capture. We ran into some debris blockages on Valley and Buffalo, but we were able to get some inspection on those. So they'll take video, and then what we're getting ready to embark on with Stantec, they're going to analyze that tow drain video for us and make recommendations. And then for Buffalo Lake, they're planning to do a work plan for replacement of the drawdown gates. They've got several planning and stakeholder meetings. We want to make sure we're getting some efficiencies between what we want to do recreationally versus what we would need to do for this rehabilitation project. A sediment removal plan. The good part about that is there's no hazardous materials, so we aren't really limited as far as what we can do with that sediment. And then they're going to develop an operations and maintenance manual and update the emergency action plan for Buffalo. And then they're also going to complete a geotechnical analysis of erosive features at Valley Creek Lake, just to get that one moving forward as well. So the scope that they prepared is $234,000. So that's what I've got to talk about today. Any questions?
What dates are you considering some of this? Have any kind of timeline?
We don't yet. You know, we got quite a bit of front end design work to do. And then we're also going to have a permitting we're gonna have some permitting, with the state and the Corps of Engineers. So that kind of gives it a more difficult, to pinpoint a date when we'd be able to start.
And one of the things, Matt, though, that Rita has talked to Stantec about is because of the existing trail system around Buffalo Lake, because of some of the efforts with green space and some of the mountain bike riders and the long-term concept of the trail connection from out at exit 94 to downtown, to actually spend some of that time up front doing a little more coordination with all those groups too, to make sure we're addressing those needs, as she said, in some of the redesign, to make sure we're keeping each of their efforts in place, if you will, for how we design potential access for a contractor to the lake to haul materials out, or where we use them on site. Because I mean, it may be possible that with some of the efforts that Green Space and the mountain biking community has used, that, I mean, maybe we can use some of that material. I don't know. Like Rita said, the good thing that we found out in the initial analysis was that sediment is not considered to be hazardous at all. So if we want to spoil some of it on site to do some things, we have that potential too. So, but that's just going to take some upfront coordination with them. The other thing that I mean, that she didn't mention, and I guess we don't want to start telling you all that we can pay for it in other ways, but there are some grant opportunities that Rita has explored. Working on a grant application right now to get some funding for the project too, going forward. So like I said, we'll kind of keep you posted on, even though you all have put money in the budget to move the project along, if we can reduce the city's costs, that's what we're going to try to do.
You mentioned the drainage, right now, some of that stuff is all locked up, I guess, because we can't control the amount of water that actually, we get a rain, that amount of water goes straight down and out, floods that area downtown. So you're, desperately need that, the ability to control those waters.
Yeah, they are important, especially in an emergency situation. We need to have control over the drive down gates. As far as the blockages I was mentioning, those are actually in what's the tow drain systems. So they're not seeing flow as far as when it rains, flow's coming through it. That's flow that's coming through the dam. And that's a natural process with these earthen dams, so.
The other thing is, tell them what the capacity, the design capacity of the lakes were. So even though we can't operate the valves, we do have some sediment.
Yeah, I believe as part of being a high hazard dam, they're required to be able to store, I want to say 26 inches of rain in a 6-hour period. So that is a huge, I hope we never see that. We'll all be underwater.
Take out a lot of sediment that's in there. I mean, you all know how deep some of that is already participation.
Yes, so as part of the initial reconnaissance that Stantec did, they did do some survey to see how much sediment is built up in there. And I want to say, depending on the dam, there were between 5 and 10 feet of sediment buildup in there. So that is taking over some of our capacity.
Keep us posted on the dates, those things. I'd be used to
We'll do. I know we want to get we got some cool recreational activities out there. So
They're staying on it, it's not something that's sitting idle.
So you've already done a lot of work on that.
we're moving it forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ray.
Okay, food truck fees. Jeff Owens or Ed?
Yeah, we're going to probably tag team
Deflect it quickly.
Jeff got to do the first part where he kind of explained what his staff goes through with the numbers and the number of food trucks they have to deal with, and the effort to collect those fees, and how minimal those fees really are. So based on that information that we gave you a couple weeks ago, we've now started to craft an ordinance to address those concerns. The draft we have before you all actually impacts two different ordinances. One is the city's business license ordinance, so that's kind of the first part of it, where we have to define what a mobile food vendor is and establish the fees for that and how that will be collected and what they need to file. And also under that ordinance, list the enforcement mechanisms. And that's been one of the difficult things that the finance department staff has had to deal with, is just that collection of those fees because of the reporting that has to go on a quarterly basis. Again, from the discussions before, what we're proposing is just a flat annual fee to be paid. They won't have to prepare those quarterly reports. And if we do have issues with food trucks, there's language in this ordinance that states that we will use the city's code enforcement procedures to make sure that we get compliance. That way, there'll still be some initial contact through the finance department, but then there will be a cooperative effort between the finance department and the planning and development office to follow through if we do have to do citations and those kinds of things. Of course, excuse me, both of those departments, just from an enforcement standpoint, if it escalates, which we hope it doesn't, but the police department is kind of back up to both those groups. We seem to have a little more success and impact when somebody with a badge and a gun shows up in dealing with our city staff. So the second part of the ordinance is actually an amendment to the city's restaurant tax ordinance. So it changes the definition so that a mobile food unit or a mobile food vendor is no longer considered to be a restaurant. So again, they would not have to go through those reporting requirements from that standpoint. And we tried to then clarify the information that they would have to file with the finance department. I think there also was some discussion previous when Jeff made the review with you all, and discussion about how these units are treated at city-sponsored events. So again, the city ordinance currently under the business license says vendors who are part of, and this is a general vendor, who's part of a local event that is 3 days long, may not be required to have a local city business license. The best we can tell from our research is that was probably put into place to exempt the vendors that were part of the Heartland Festival years ago, because it was a 3-day event. So going forward, if there is still a 3-day event, that section of the ordinance is still going to be remaining. So those vendors would be exempt, but the city would exempt food vendors from a license if they were a part of a city activity. So just as an example, because the question comes up a lot of times on Tavern in the Garden. Tavern in the Garden is not a city-sponsored event. It occurs over the summer months, so it extends for an extended period of time that is not sponsored by the city. So those food vendors that are a part of Tavern in the Garden would be required to get a city business license and operate. It would be the vendor, for example, at the Wine Fest a couple weeks ago, there was a vendor who was there who was from Campbellsville. If that's the only event, that's the only time they're in our community, then they are exempt from obtaining a business license. They still have to pay a vendor fee if the city charges that as part of the event, but they don't get a city business license. However, that same business, if they do other business at other activities in town, for example, they set up out at Tulsa for lunch once a month,
then they do get a city business license because they are conducting business. It's only if the only event that you're associated with would be a city event, the ordinance says they would be exempted. So I hope that helps explain things. Like I said, this is our,
Okay, I think I got a little, for example, on the Tavern in the Garden.
okay,
Those are reoccurring different food trucks every week for somebody
Right.
different. They're gonna fall under the requirement of the $250.
That is correct.
Which includes their business license.
that is correct.
Okay.
But like I said, if they just show up at the Wine Fest and they do nothing else in the community, they're just here one day, then they're paying the city a vendor fee to set up at the Wine Fest, but they're not doing anything.
How do we police food trucks? I mean, how do we know whether they're here once or 4 or 5?
Well,
or
that's what I was trying to explain to you earlier, a little bit of the joint effort that will be now taking place between the finance department, and the planning and development department. Currently, the finance department does, a pretty good job of trying to track, and locate, folks as they set up in the community. But we haven't really had a mechanism. I mean, all they could do was talk to the person. Under the business license ordinance, there wasn't a procedure for the enforcement of that. That's why we've added the language that says the director of finance can now use the enforcement procedures under the code enforcement ordinance to do that, which tells us in the ordinance that the city established for the code enforcement board, business licenses would fall in a category that's listed as just other city ordinances and requirements. So the first offense is a $25 citation. The second offense is $75, and I think the third offense is $200. So the effort is going to be to, when we discover one of these locations, to reach out to them and remind them that the second, if they're set up for more than one occasion, probably the citations and the fees that we issue to them are going to be more than the $250 that they would be paying to the city. We also put a provision in the ordinance that would say if they set up at the same location on more than 2 occasions, instead of just citing only the food truck operator, we can also cite the property owner. Because the thought was at that point, if they're set up on my property multiple times, there's probably some kind of agreement between me as the property owner and that food vendor that I'm allowing them to do that and not go through the proper city procedure. Because that's the issue. I mean, it's not a permanent location. So as you point out, Cindy, it's a little bit harder to track and follow these folks. But we think if we do, between the two departments, make the effort and also have the ability to issue the citation, that it will improve that enforcement effort. And again, as always, the first effort is going to be simply to reach out to them and talk to them and have them come down to City Hall and get the license and not cite somebody immediately. I mean, we just want to get the compliance. That's going to be the goal. And so that's going to be the effort that the staff is going to put forth that way. Not to say, hey, we're here and we're going to issue a citation, but look, we'd like you to, here's the requirement. You may not be aware of it. Here's the application form. Come down to City Hall and we can help you get through the process.
I'm just a little confused still though, Ed, about how we're going to, because if a mobile food vendor sets up at a city event, obviously we know that they're at a city event, it's going to be $250. If we've got one we just don't have the personnel to be able to every day drive around and see who's sitting in a factory or who's sitting over at a pharmacy or something like that, to know that they are setting up there and how many times they set up there to then they show up at a city event and all that. I just don't think we have the personnel to really, the only way I can see us doing this is those that set up at a city-sponsored event that we can catch this.
Well, I mean, if they're set up and it's not a city-sponsored event, I mean, Marty.
But we're gonna sit, we've got personnel that can drive every day to the factories, industrial park, to, That's what I'm asking. I don't think we have that spare personnel.
I think what Ed was saying though is that if the fees and the fines and stuff are enough of a deterrent, it's kind of a self-policing thing. They don't
$25.
get those fines.
That's where I was going with the fees, because if they're gonna set up for free at one event, so the city's sponsoring, they have to pay that fee. And if that's a one-time a year deal, they come back and they get caught set up the second time inside that year, the fee was only $25. They've got to set up twice for $25, where everybody else has to pay $250. See what I'm saying? And I can violate that rule not only twice, but I can violate that rule 3 times over and still get a discount on paying the $250 vendor fee. See where I'm going? You get 3 setups for $100.
So, and also,
That's what
so
I'm saying.
if they set up at a city event, they're gonna pay the $250.
No, he's
They're
saying.
they're gonna pay whatever the vendor
The
fee
vendor
is
fee, and then
for
we don't
that
worry
event.
about the $250.
Correct.
What is an average charge for a vendor setup, food vendor at one of our city events? I've never heard that figure.
I think at some of them, it's either 250 or 300, isn't it? Jeff?
That's the setup fee for like,
Yes.
let's say for instance.
To rent that space.
Huh?
Yeah, to rent that space at one of our events. Yeah, I think it's 250 or 300.
Well, the other reason I asked that was Sunday, I went to Kroger's at the very end of, on Dolphin Drive, where the old K&D Bank used to be. Somebody just pulled up an old Coca-Cola truck, it looked nice. I thought, oh, gosh, this is gonna be nice. And they pulled up a grill that was sitting on the backside of it, and then they had cases of Coke, it was messy. And I thought, I can't believe anybody would eat from that truck. I didn't know what they were making, but I thought, I wonder if they have a license to be set up there. That's what I'm asking. Like Marty says, how do we enforce that?
Well,
We're just gonna, we will make the effort to be diligent. I'm not gonna tell you that, yeah, we're gonna have somebody who's gonna sit in a city truck and drive around every street in town every Monday through Friday to try to catch a food vendor. But we're gonna make more of a concerted effort. And I will tell you that right now, though, in the finance department, I think they have a pretty good idea of the total number of vendors and where they are, but with no real enforcement, that's been the issue. Oh, okay, I'll come in tomorrow. Oh, okay, I'll file that form with you next month. Oh, okay, and there's no consequences. I understand your point, Matt, about the first violation is only 25 and the second one's 75, but the third one is 200. So at that point, if it's the third time, then you've paid the city $300 in fines, which is more in excess of the license. But if that's something we need to look at going forward and need to change those, I will tell you all, we, from the administrative standpoint, we will continue to evaluate that. And if we think we need to raise some of those fines as disincentive, I guess you will, then we will be back before you all saying, yeah, that $25 fee isn't enough. But again, the effort from the staff is first going to be to meet with those folks and get them to come down to City Hall and get the license. We've talked about having a packet ready and go and meet with them and say, here's the packet, help us fill it out, do it right now and take the information instead of trying to be real
Well, what
difficult about the
happens-
process.
What happens if they told Jeff and his department, we'll be down, and they never come down? How are you gonna enforce and make them come in to fill that application out and pay the $250?
We'll have that documentation, we find them, then we're going to issue them a citation.
I understand what Cindy's saying, but those same people aren't coming in and paying their taxes.
I understand.
It's no different than having to chase them down the aisle.
Yeah.
Find out.
Yeah, that's
Just
what I
send them a
mean.
letter to say, you have to send in your restaurant tax. And there's ways through social media that the girls are really good about knowing. There's, they can look up on social media and find out where these good restaurants
See, I didn't want to give away all our secrets.
are. Well, they want out there anyways.
for years, we told Tracy and Jamie that we needed badges. So, Jeremy,
We need
we
that.
need badges. We'll have your police.
Take them miles away.
I think it's good, because I have done it where I've seen vendors set up in parking lots and usually it's there with the store, around Valentine's Day or something, one of my people say, well, somebody's selling roses or something, so, you know, if I go and check on it, then of course they always ask, who am I?
Right.
But usually I'll just call downtown and say, well, you know, we got somebody up here, check on their business license.
That's how we hear about a lot
I-
of
And
things.
that's usually how
A lot of times, the food trucks tell on. their
Oh, the food
competitors.
That's, I mean, the biggest source of a lot of the information is from their competition, because they know, hey, I've got a license, I'm gonna check and make sure Marty has a license, so they're gonna call Sam or Diana and say, look, I mean, because these folks, I mean, like I said, it's been difficult to get them to file some of the things and do it, but I mean, they end up knowing our staff, so I mean, like I said, that's still gonna be the effort, is that the staff is gonna reach out and try to do that.
For the record, I never told on your mother's side. Sort of. Oh, don't do it inside people.
Anybody have any special announcements or phrases or anything they'd like to talk about? I will say 2 weeks ago, as we were sitting here in our council meeting, none of us knew it at the time, but shortly after we left, we found out that we had a fire down at Public Works. And so I want to tell you that our grinder down there, it caught fire, and our Public Works employees had already left for the day. Fire department gets out there, they do a great job, but several of our Public Works employees, when they found that out, turned their trucks around and came back down there, and they jumped on a lot of other equipment to help get a lot of the mulch that had already been mulched up from the grinder away from it, to help the fire department essentially put all the mulch out. And so I went down and watched it for a while, and Don was down there, and Mark was down there, and several other people, and it was quite a group effort, and I was impressed by both departments and how they worked well together, and the knowledge that they all had at their respective disciplines. So that was a good thing to see. So I want to commend both those departments for a great job. Unfortunately, we lost a pretty important piece of equipment, but because we have Cindy, we had good insurance on it. So we're squared away, and we'll get it back and running pretty soon. And just like the way things are going, we got great people working for the city.
They did, I watched them, they dug a pit and had all this pretty well, it's like they've done that before. In a roundabout way, but it was really good to watch them.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. I don't know if Mark and Don told them what to do, but they knew what they were doing.
Don got pizzas, that's all we're gonna have.
You ever seen hungry firefighters? You gotta get a pizza.
So that's all I have. Anybody have anything else? Okay, that will be adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.